I'm Kinley Maddox, and this is the moment my entire life flipped upside down. It was just another sweltering afternoon at the charity shelter in Miami. Weeks after the tropical storm ripped through the city, I was handing out bottled water and canned food to families who had lost everything wearing the same old jeans and donated t-shirt I'd been living in. Then, this older man in an expensive suit walked straight toward me. He looked out of place among the tents and folding tables. He didn't say a word at first, just stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Finally, he pulled me aside away from the crowd and asked quietly, his voice shaking a little. "Have you ever received any money from your grandfather?" I froze. No one had ever mentioned a grandfather sending money. The people who raised me after my parents were gone always told me he wanted nothing to do with me, that he blamed me for what happened to my mom. I told him no. I'd never gotten a single dollar. His face went pale like he'd just heard the worst news possible. That one question changed everything. Because somewhere out there, a $3 million trust fund in my name had vanished, and I was about to find out who took it. If you've ever been lied to by the people closest to you, the ones who were supposed to protect you, drop a comment below and tell me your story. How far would someone in your family go for money? Hit that like button. If this already has you hooked, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe with notifications on. These real stories deserve to be told. But to understand why that man flew all the way from New York just to ask me that question, we have to go back to the phone call that started it all. Victor Maddox sat alone in his high-rise office in Manhattan when the private investigator finally called. Victor Maddox sat alone in his corner office on the 78th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The city skyline stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but he barely noticed it. In his hands was a thin manila folder delivered that morning by courier from a private investigator he had hired on a hunch months earlier. He opened it slowly. The first few pages were standard background reports. Then came the photographs. The young woman in the pictures had warm brown skin and thick natural hair pulled back into a practical ponytail. She wore faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt with the logo of a local relief organization. In one shot, she handed a bottle of water to an elderly man sitting on a cot. In another, she organized boxes of donated clothing on a long table under a white tent. Her face showed exhaustion, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes that made Victor's chest tighten. Kinley Maddox, his granddaughter. The investigator's summary was straightforward. After the recent tropical storm hammered South Florida, Kinley had been staying at a charity-run temporary shelter in the Miami area. She wasn't just passing through. She was volunteering long hours every day. The report noted that she had no significant personal assets registered in her name, no active bank accounts with substantial balances, and no property. Meanwhile, the family home in a comfortable Miami suburb had already been repaired and reoccupied by the legal guardian and her younger daughter. Victor leaned back in his leather chair, the folder resting on the mahogany desk. He had always assumed the trust fund he established 19 years ago was being used properly. $10,000 deposited every month without fail, totaling well over $3 million by now. The account was in Kinley's name, but as her legal guardian after Patrick's death, Diane Zimmerman had full authority to withdraw funds for living expenses, education, medical care, anything related to raising the child. The lawyers had assured him the setup was standard and protected. He had signed the papers in a fog of grief shortly after Frances died from complications during childbirth. At the time, taking care of a newborn while running a real estate empire felt impossible. When Patrick remarried a few years later and Diane gave birth to Hadley, it seemed like the perfect solution, a stable home with a new family. Victor rubbed his temples. He had never insisted on detailed spending reports. A brief email or holiday card from Diane every year was enough to ease his conscience. She always wrote that Kinley was doing fine, adjusting well, focused on school. He had believed it because believing was easier than facing the alternative. Now the photographs told a different story. A 9-year-old woman sleeping on a cot in a shelter gym converted into temporary housing. No designer clothes, no car, no signs of the financial security he thought he had provided. He picked up his phone and dialed the investigator Marcus Hale, a former Miami detective he had worked with on real estate due diligence cases. "Tell me again why she's still there," Victor said without greeting. Marcus's voice was calm, professional. The guardian's residence was damaged but repaired within weeks using insurance and personal funds. The younger daughter moved back immediately. Kinley chose to stay and help with relief efforts. She told staff she's used to making her own way. Victor's grip tightened on the phone. Chose to stay or wasn't given a choice. That's harder to confirm without direct access, Marcus replied. No police reports, no formal complaints. Everything looks clean on paper. Victor thanked him and hung up. He opened the folder again, flipping to the bank transfer records he had requested as an attachment. The deposits were all there monthly, automatic, never missed. But there were no corresponding statements showing how the money had been spent. The trust documents allowed the guardian broad discretion for the benefit of the beneficiary. He had trusted that language. He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The Hudson River glinted far below. He thought about Frances, her laugh, her stubborn determination to become a teacher despite his offers to pay for medical school. She had married Patrick Zimmerman, a high school coach with a steady job and big dreams for a family. Then the accident took Patrick when Kinley was 15. Victor had sent flowers, increased the monthly deposit slightly, and accepted Diane's assurances that everything was under control. Now doubt crept in like cold air through a cracked window. Not accusation yet, just questions. Why no college savings visible? Why no car in Kinley's name? Why was she still wearing donated clothes? Victor returned to his desk and booked the earliest first-class flight to Miami. Departing that evening, he printed a slim selection of the trust documents and transfer confirmations. Nothing too aggressive, just enough to start a conversation. He told his assistant to clear his schedule for the next several days, citing a personal matter. As the private car took him through Manhattan traffic toward JFK, Victor stared at the photographs again on his tablet. Kinley's smile in one image reminded him painfully of Frances at the same age. He had missed so much already. Whatever the truth was, he needed to hear it directly from her. The flight south took less than 3 hours. By the time the plane touched down in Miami, night had fallen, and the humid air carried the faint scent of rain-soaked earth. Victor checked into a quiet hotel near the airport, showered and slept fitfully. Early the next morning, he rented a nondescript sedan, no driver, no luxury markings, and drove himself toward the address Marcus had provided for the shelter. The route took him through neighborhoods still showing scars from the storm, blue tarps on roofs, piles of debris at curbsides, downed trees being chainsawed into pieces. He parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, the folder tucked under his arm. The shelter occupied a community center gymnasium, white tents erected in the parking lot for overflow. Volunteers in bright vests directed traffic. Victor adjusted his tie, suddenly aware of how out of place his tailored suit would appear. He stepped inside the chain-link fence, heart beating faster than it had in years. Victor stepped through the chain-link gate into the crowded parking lot of the community center turned shelter. The South Florida sun beat down relentlessly, turning the asphalt hot under his polished shoes. Blue tarps flapped overhead on temporary structures, and the air carried a mix of grilled food from a volunteer barbecue and the faint, lingering dampness from storm-soaked ground. A woman in a red volunteer vest approached him near the entrance. Her name tag read, Mrs. Elena Lopez, site director. She had kind eyes framed by tired lines and a clipboard in hand. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, sizing up his suit with polite curiosity. Victor cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Kinley Maddox. I believe she's volunteering here." Mrs. Lopez nodded without hesitation. "She's one of our best helpers. Follow me." She led him through a side door into the main building. The hallway was narrow-lined with stacked boxes of diapers and cleaning supplies. Voices echoed from the gymnasium ahead. Children laughing, adults coordinating in Spanish and English. The smell of coffee and bleach hung in the air. They emerged into the large open space where rows of folding tables had been set up for distribution. Families waited patiently in lines. Volunteers sorted canned goods and hygiene kits. Kinley stood at one table, guiding a young mother with 2 small kids through the selection process. She pointed out sizes for children's clothing, her voice soft and patient despite the obvious weariness in her posture. Her hair was tied back, a few strands escaping around her face. She wore simple cargo shorts, and a shelter-issued t-shirt sleeves rolled up as she lifted a box of formula. Victor stopped at the edge of the room, watching her for several minutes. The way she knelt to speak, eye level with the children, the gentle smile she offered, the mother, it stirred something deep and painful in him. Finally, he walked forward. Kinley looked up as he approached her, expression shifting from focused to cautiously polite. "Excuse me," Victor said quietly. Are you Kinley Maddox? She straightened, wiping her hands on her shorts. Yes, that's me. Do I know you? He hesitated, searching for the right words. My name is Victor Maddox. I'm your grandfather. The words hung between them. Kinley's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't smile. Instead, she glanced around at the busy room, then nodded toward a quieter corner near the exit doors. Let's talk over there, she said, leading the way. They stood in the shaded hallway outside the gym. Kinley crossed her arms, not hostile but clearly guarded. Victor pulled out his phone and showed her an old photo of Francis at 19 standing on a beach. Laughing wrist turned just enough to reveal a small heart-shaped birthmark. Your mother had this mark on her left wrist, he said softly. You have the same one. Kinley glanced down at her own wrist instinctively, then back at him. Her expression softened a fraction, but suspicion remained. No one ever told me about a birthmark, she said. Diane never mentioned you at all, except to say you didn't want anything to do with us after Mom died. Victor felt the words like a punch. He kept his voice steady. I'd like to explain if you'll let me. Maybe over dinner tonight. There's a quiet restaurant at my hotel nearby. Kinley studied him for a long moment. Volunteers passed by, carrying boxes, casting curious glances. She shifted her weight, clearly weighing her options. I have another shift until 6:00, she said finally. I can meet you at 7, but only for an hour. I need to be back here early tomorrow. Victor nodded gratefully. That's more than fair. I'll send a car if you'd like, or meet you wherever you're comfortable. I'll find my own way, she replied firmly. Text me the address. He gave her his number and she typed it into her basic phone. Then she returned to her table without another word, resuming her work as if the conversation had been routine. Victor walked back to his rental car in a daze. The short exchange had told him more than any report. Kinley's guarded tone, the way she mentioned Diane so matter-of-factly. The casual reference to Hadley's teasing it all painted a picture of distance he hadn't expected. He drove to a nearby cafe to wait out the afternoon, ordering black coffee he barely tasted. His mind replayed the birthmark detail. He had chosen it deliberately, something only family would know, something Diane couldn't have fabricated easily. Kinley's reaction confirmed she had never heard it before. By 7, he sat at a corner table in the hotel's seafood restaurant overlooking the ocean. The place was understated with white tablecloths and soft lighting. He arrived early, folder left in the room this time. Kinley appeared at the entrance right on time, having changed into clean jeans and a simple blouse, still practical, nothing extravagant. The hostess led her over. Thank you for coming, Victor said as she sat. She nodded, accepting a glass of water. I almost didn't, but that birthmark thing, it got me curious. They ordered light meals, grilled fish for him, salad for her. Conversation started slow. Victor asked about her day at the shelter. It keeps me busy, she said. After the storm hit, Diane said the house repairs would take longer, and space was tight with contractors coming and going. She suggested I stay and help out here since I know a lot of the families from the neighborhood. Victor listened carefully, noting how she phrased it. Suggested, not insisted. No bitterness, yet just acceptance. And Hadley, he asked gently. Kinley shrugged. She went back home as soon as school started again. She's got activities, new clothes for the year. She always calls me lazy for staying here longer. The casual way she said it broke Victor's heart a little more. He steered away from money questions, focusing on Francis instead. Your mother wanted to teach elementary school, he said. She volunteered at after-school programs, even in college. Kinley's eyes lit up with genuine interest. I didn't know that. Diane never really talked about her. They lingered over coffee. Kinley asked a few careful questions about Francis's childhood, listening intently to stories of beach trips and holiday dinners. Victor kept it light, avoiding anything that might overwhelm her. As the hour wound down, Kinley checked her phone. I should head back. Victor stood. Thank you for trusting me this far. I'd like to keep talking if you're willing. She paused at the table. Maybe one step at a time. He watched her leave, walking toward the bus stop in the warm evening air. Back in his room, Victor sat on the balcony, overlooking the dark ocean. The short dinner had given him more questions than answers, but also a fragile threat of connection. Kinley hadn't run away. She had listened. That was enough for now. The restaurant's large windows framed the dark Atlantic beyond, waves barely visible under the moonlight. Victor and Kinley sat at their corner table plates, pushed aside the remains of dinner growing cold. He had waited until the server refilled their water before reaching into his briefcase. He placed a slim folder on the table and opened it to a printed summary page. "This is something I've carried with me since arriving," he said quietly. Kinley leaned forward, curious but still reserved. The page showed a column of dates stretching back years, each with a transfer amount $10,000 month after month. "These are deposits I made into a trust fund set up in your name right after your mother passed," Victor explained. "The total has gone well past $3 million by now. It was meant to cover everything: education, living costs, whatever you needed growing up." Kinley stared at the numbers, her fork forgotten in her hand. She traced one line with her finger as if testing if the paper was real. "I've never seen this before. No one ever told me about any trust fund." Victor nodded slowly, keeping his tone neutral. "When your father remarried and Diane became your legal guardian, the account allowed her to withdraw funds for reasonable expenses related to raising you. Things like housing, food, school, that's standard under Florida law for minors." He didn't add accusation, only fact. Kinley's brow furrowed as she processed it. "So all this money, it was supposed to be for me?" "That was the intention," Victor replied. "I trusted the system and the people in your life to use it properly." Kinley sat back, folding her hands in her lap. The surprise in her eyes shifted to something more complicated. Confusion mixed with a quiet hurt. He pulled out his phone and dialed a contact marked David Clean, attorney. The call connected quickly. "David, it's Victor. I'm with Kinley now. I need you to run a full trace on recent activity in the trust: withdrawals, transfers, everything from the last 5 years at least. Prioritize the largest ones." David's voice came through clearly on speaker, professional and calm. "I can start pulling statements tonight, but a detailed forensic review will take a few days. I'll need signed authorization from you and ideally from Kinley once we confirm her access." Victor looked across the table. Kinley gave a small nod. "We'll get that sorted tomorrow," Victor said. "Keep me updated." He ended the call and slipped the phone away. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by distant clatter from the kitchen. Kinley spoke first, voice low. "After Dad's accident, I was 15. Things changed at home. Diane started focusing more on Hadley. New clothes for her, better schools, dance lessons. I got told to pitch in more, take part-time jobs at local stores to cover my own stuff." Victor listened without interrupting, his coffee untouched. "She'd say it built character," Kinley continued. "Hadley picked up on it. 2 little comments about how I didn't need much anyway. I figured that's just how it was after losing Dad. Money got tight for everyone." She shrugged, but the motion carried years of quiet acceptance. Victor felt the weight of it settle in his chest. He had sent those deposits religiously, convinced they eased his absence. "I should have asked for more updates," he said finally. "I let distance become an excuse." Kinley met his gaze. "Why didn't you visit or call?" The question was direct, not angry, just searching. Victor exhaled slowly. "Grief does strange things. Losing Francis broke something in me. I threw myself into work, told myself the money was my way of providing. Diane sent occasional photos and notes saying, 'You were fine.' I didn't push because facing the truth felt harder than signing checks." He reached into the folder again and pulled out a small printed photo. Francis on a pier, sketch pad in hand, drawing the ocean at sunset. "Your mother loved painting water. He said she'd sit for hours capturing how the light changed on waves. Said it made her feel connected to something bigger." Kinley took the photo carefully, studying her mother's concentrated expression. A faint smile touched her lips. "I've always liked drawing horizons," she admitted. "Never knew where that came from." They talked longer than planned. Kinley shared small memories of Patrick coaching weekend soccer, teaching her to change a tire. Victor reciprocated with stories of Frances's stubborn streak, how she insisted on earning her own way through college. As the restaurant emptied around them, Kinley glanced at her watch. "I should catch the last bus back." Victor signaled for the check. "Let me drive you, it's the least I can do." She hesitated, then agreed. The ride to the shelter was quiet. City lights reflecting off wet streets still drying from earlier rain. When they pulled up, Kinley paused at the car door. "This is a lot to take in," she said. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need," Victor replied. "I'll be here." She nodded and stepped out, disappearing into the lighted entrance. Victor watched until the door closed behind her, then drove back to the hotel. In his suite, he stood at the window again, staring at the dark sea. The partial records lay on the desk, proof of his intent but no proof yet of outcome. David's review would clarify things soon. Until then, doubt lingered, mixed with cautious hope from the evening's conversation. Victor's phone buzzed on the hotel desk while he reviewed emails. The caller ID showed David Klein. He answered immediately. "I have the preliminary report," David said. "Voice study. Several large withdrawals over the past few years labeled as family expenses and educational costs for dependent in the household. Nothing obviously illegal on the surface. Guardians have latitude for that kind of thing, but the amounts are substantial, and most documentation ties to private school tuition and extracurriculars that don't match Kinley's records." Victor sat forward. "How substantial? Multiple 6F-figure transfers. I need more time for vendor invoices and bank imaging to see exact spending. Could be legitimate, could be stretching the definition of benefit of the beneficiary." "Keep digging," Victor instructed. Quietly, he ended the call and stared at the ocean view, mind turning. The labels sounded reasonable enough on paper. Guardians often covered household costs when raising multiple children. But the shelter photographs lingered in his thoughts. He decided to test the water himself. He dialed the home number he hadn't used in years. Diane answered on the third ring, warm and surprised. "Victor, it's been ages. How are you?" "I'm in Florida, actually," he said evenly. "Came down after hearing about the storm damage. How's everyone holding up?" "We're managing," she replied. "Repairs are mostly done, insurance covered a lot." "And Kinley?" he asked. "Is she back home yet?" Diane hesitated just a fraction. "She's still at the community center helping out. You know how she is always wanting to pitch in. We've got workers finishing the guest wing, so it's tight here." She insisted on staying to volunteer. A younger voice piped up in the background. "Mom, who's that?" Diane laughed lightly. "It's your grandfather, Hadley. Say hi." Hadley came on the line, bright and cheerful. "Hi, Kinley loves doing charity stuff. She's super into it. I've got midterms coming up, so I'm crazy busy with school." Victor kept his tone friendly. "Sounds like you're both keeping busy. I'd love to stop by and see the place when it's convenient." "Of course," Diane said quickly. "Just let us know when. We'd love to catch up." They exchanged a few more pleasantries before hanging up. Victor set the phone down slowly. Diane's concern had sounded genuine. Hadley's chatter typical for a teenager. Yet something felt off, like a script performed too smoothly. He met Kinley later that afternoon at a quiet coffee shop near the shelter. She arrived in fresh clothes borrowed from donations, hair still damp from a quick shower. He recounted the call word for word, watching her reaction. Kinley stirred her iced tea, frowning slightly. "That's pretty much how she always explains it. I chose to stay because I wanted to help and the house isn't ready." "But the repairs," Victor pressed gently. She shrugged. "They finished the main areas weeks ago. Diane said the extra work would be noisy, better for me to avoid the dust." Victor nodded, letting it sink in. Kinley continued without prompting. "Hadley's comments don't surprise me. She's been getting new laptops and dance gear while I make do with hand-me-downs. Diane says it's because Hadley's activities cost more." I figured that was fair. Her defense of Diane came out automatic, years of habit. Victor heard the lingering loyalty in her voice. The child still hoping for fairness. "It's possible everything's above board," he said carefully. "David's just double-checking routine withdrawals, big ones for household and school costs." Kinley looked up sharply. "School costs? I went to public school after Dad died. Hadley's the one at that private academy downtown." Victor didn't push further. The seed of doubt was planted. Forcing it now would only make her pull back. They changed topics. Kinley talked about volunteers she'd met, families rebuilding lives, kids excited for donated toys. Victor shared a harmless story about Frances organizing charity drives in high school. The conversation flowed easier than before. Small bridges forming. As they parted outside the shop, Kinley paused. "Thanks for not assuming the worst right away. It's a lot to wrap my head around." "I'm not assuming anything yet," Victor assured her. "We'll wait for facts." She nodded and headed back to the shelter. Victor watched her go, then returned to the hotel. That evening he reviewed the preliminary summaries David emailed. The educational costs line items matched tuition statements for an elite prep school, Hadley's name on every invoice. Family expenses included home renovations and vehicle purchases registered solely to Diane. Still circumstantial. Guardians could argue shared benefits. Victor closed the laptop. Confrontation too soon risked pushing Diane into defensiveness or worse, legal stonewalling. He texted Kinley, "Good night," keeping it light. She replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Sleep came slowly. Victor lay awake, listening to distant traffic weighing his next move. A direct visit to the house felt inevitable, but timing mattered. He needed Kinley on board, not caught in the middle. The doubt had deepened, but certainty remained out of reach. The rental sedan pulled into the circular driveway of the Zimmerman residence in a gated Miami suburb. The house was a modern two-story stucco, with fresh paint and manicured palms. No visible signs of storm damage remained. Victor parked behind David Klein's discreet gray SUV. Kinley sat in the back seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. David turned from the front passenger seat. "Remember, we're here to ask questions, not accuse outright. Let the documents speak." Victor nodded. They stepped out into the warm morning air. Kinley hesitated before following, smoothing her simple sundress. Diane opened the door almost immediately, smile wide and welcoming. "Victor, you made it. And Kinley, honey, it's good to see you." She hugged Kinley briefly, then ushered them inside. The foyer opened to a spacious living room with high ceilings, new leather furniture, and abstract art on the walls. Hadley appeared at the top of the stairs in designer leggings and a cropped-top phone in hand. She descended gracefully, flashing a polite smile. "Hi, grandfather." "Hi, sis." Victor returned the greeting evenly. They settled in the living room, Diane and Hadley on the long sofa. Victor and David in armchairs, Kinley on a side chair slightly apart. Diane offered coffee, which David accepted for everyone to keep things civil. As cups were passed, Victor placed a thick folder on the glass coffee table. "Thank you for having us," he began. "I've been going over the trust fund records with David. There are some discrepancies I hope you can clear up." Diane's smile stayed in place. "Of course, anything I can do." Victor opened the folder to a highlighted summary. The trust for Kinley has had over $3 million deposited since its creation, but recent withdrawals don't seem to align with her direct benefit. He slid the page across. Diane glanced at it, expression calm. "Those are normal family expenses," she said smoothly. "Raising 2 girls isn't cheap. Roof repairs after the storm, utilities, groceries. We all shared the house." David leaned forward. "The labels say educational costs for dependents and household maintenance. Can you walk us through some of the larger ones?" Diane nodded. "Absolutely. Hadley's tuition at Coral Ridge Academy is $4,500 a year. Dance competitions, tutoring, those add up." Hadley chimed in brightly. "And the trip to Aruba last spring was amazing. Mom said it was good for family bonding after all the storm stress." Kinley shifted in her seat, eyes widening slightly. Victor kept his face neutral. David flipped to another page. "This withdrawal for $6,000 listed as home renovation. The contractor invoices are in Hadley's name for her bedroom suite." Diane waved a hand. "It was for the whole upstairs. Kinley had her room too." "But Kinley hasn't lived here full-time in months," David pointed out quietly. "And this vehicle purchase registered solely to you." Diane's smile tightened. "Company car for errands benefited everyone." Hadley scrolled her phone absently. "Kinley never wanted fancy stuff anyway. She's always been more basic." The word hung in the air. Kinley's cheeks flushed, but she stayed silent. Victor spoke for the first time since the documents came out. The trust was established specifically for Kinley's future. Florida law allows guardians reasonable expenses, but the bulk must benefit the named beneficiary. These records show almost nothing directly for her. No college fund contributions, no personal accounts, no major purchases in her name. Diane straightened. "I've raised her since she was little. Clothes, food, a roof, that's benefit enough. The money kept the household running." David produced more pages, invoices for European vacations, jewelry, a pool installation. "These don't mention Kinley at all." Diane's composure cracked a fraction. "Bank errors happen. Or maybe the lawyers mislabeled." Hadley looked up from her phone, sensing tension. "Mom did everything for both of us. Kinley just didn't want the same things. She never complained about not having new clothes." Kinley finally spoke, voice steady. "I didn't complain because I thought we couldn't afford it." Diane shot her a sharp glance. "We managed fine." Victor's tone remained even. Where has the $3 million trust fund for Kinley gone, Diane? The question landed heavily. Diane's eyes darted between faces. It's gone into raising my family, she said, voice rising. Frances had everything handed to her rich parents' perfect husband. When she died suddenly, there was all this money for her kid. I had to make it work for everyone. Hadley frowned. Mom. Diane continued, words tumbling faster. Why should only one child get advantages? Hadley deserved opportunities too. David closed the folder. These patterns suggest intentional diversion of funds meant for Kinley. That crosses into embezzlement territory. Diane stood abruptly. You're twisting this. I'm the one who stayed, who sacrificed. Victor looked at Kinley, who met his gaze with quiet resolve. David stepped into the hallway and made a call. Uniformed officers arrived within minutes. Local police responding to reported financial fraud with documentation in hand. Diane's protests grew louder as they explained the arrest process. You can't do this in my home, she exclaimed. Hadley dropped her phone, eyes wide. Mom, what's happening? Diane turned to her daughter, face crumpling. It's a misunderstanding, baby. Call our lawyer. The officers cuffed Diane gently but firmly, reading rights. She went silent, staring at the floor as they let her out. Hadley followed to the doorway, watching the patrol car pull away, confusion turning to shock. Kinley remained seated, breathing measured. Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. David gathered the documents. Well, need copies for the case file. Hadley turned back inside, voice trembling. This is crazy. Mom wouldn't steal. But the evidence scattered on the table told another story. Victor guided Kinley to the car. She paused at the threshold, looking back once at the stunned teenager in the doorway. The drive away from the suburb felt surreal, palm trees blurring past windows. The criminal courthouse in downtown Miami became a familiar place over the following months. Proceedings dragged on as Diane's defense team filed motions, challenged chain of custody on bank records, and argued the withdrawals fell within broad guardian discretion under state law. Victor and Kinley attended most sessions, sitting in the public gallery behind the prosecution table. David Kinley coordinated with the state attorney, presenting evidence methodically to avoid any appearance of overreach. Opening statements set the tone. The prosecutor outlined a pattern of systematic diversion funds intended for one beneficiary, redirected to personal luxury and the exclusive benefit of another child. Diane's attorney countered that all spending supported the household where Kinley lived for years, claiming any imbalance was unintentional. Bank experts took the stand first. They displayed transfer logs projected on a large screen, highlighting deposits from Victor's account, followed by rapid outflows to vendors unrelated to Kinley's needs. Tuition payments to Coral Ridge Academy appeared repeatedly, all invoiced to Hadley Zimmerman. Diane sat straight in her chair at the defense table, expression composed. Hadley attended several days, dressed conservatively, sitting with a family friend. When Hadley was called as a witness for the defense, she walked to the stand with visible nerves. The attorney asked about home life. Mom always made sure we had food, clothes, a place to live, she said. She treated us both the same. The prosecutor cross-examined gently but firmly. He introduced printed text messages from Hadley's phone recovered via subpoena, where she bragged to friends about new designer bags or upcoming trips, while in the same threads dismissing Kinley's older wardrobe. Hadley glanced at her mother, then at the jury. I guess Mom bought more for me because I asked. I didn't think it was wrong. The admission hung in the quiet courtroom. Diane's attorney objected on relevance, but the judge allowed it. Kinley testified the next week. She wore a simple navy dress, hair neatly pulled back. Her voice stayed even throughout. I received basic support, food, a room, public school, she said, but larger expenses went elsewhere. I worked part-time jobs from 16 to cover extras. The prosecutor asked about specific years. Kinley recalled instances calmly, Hadley's private lessons while she took the bus. New furniture delivered for the younger girl's room while hers stayed the same. She didn't raise her voice or show tears. The jury watched her steady delivery. Victor took the stand briefly, to confirm the trust's purpose established solely for Kinley's security after Frances's death. He acknowledged signing broad guardian powers, but stated his expectation was primary benefit to his granddaughter. Diane testified last for the defense. She maintained the fund sustained the entire family unit, insisting any disparity reflected different interests between the girls. I loved both of them. She said money was for stability. Cross-examination proved difficult for her. When shown jewelry receipts and vacation bookings excluding Kinley, she blamed accounting errors or gifts from other sources. Closing arguments summarized months of testimony. The prosecutor emphasized intent repeated choices favoring one child, while the named beneficiary received minimal direct support. Diane's lawyer pleaded for understanding of complex family dynamics. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the foreperson stood. We find the defendant guilty on all counts of embezzlement and fraud. Diane showed no outward reaction. Hadley in the gallery covered her face. Sentencing came weeks later. The judge reviewed victim impact statements, including one from Kinley, read by the prosecutor, focused on lost opportunities rather than anger. 12 years incarceration. The judge announced full restitution ordered. All assets traceable to diverted funds, residence, vehicles, accounts will be seized and liquidated for return to the trust. Hadley faced no charges as a minor during most transactions. She qualified as an indirect beneficiary without criminal liability. Court services arranged for her to live with a maternal aunt in Central Florida in a modest apartment far from former luxuries. Victor and Kinley left the courthouse into bright sunlight. Reporters waited outside, but David steered them away. In the car, Kinley stared out the window. It's over. Victor nodded. The legal part, yes. She turned to him. I don't feel victory. Just empty. That's normal. Healing takes longer than any trial. They flew back to New York that evening. The seized assets would rebuild the trust over time, but money felt secondary now. Hadley's new life began quietly. No private school, no extravagant allowances. The aunt provided structure and part-time work expectations. Diane began her sentence at a federal facility, standard conditions for financial crimes. Kinley unpacked in the guest room. Victor prepared simple and comfortable. Kinley stepped into the spacious penthouse for the first time, suitcase in hand. The marble floors and panoramic views of Central Park felt overwhelming. Victor showed her to a guest suite, but she hesitated. I'm not ready for all this space, she said quietly. Could I start in the smaller guest room or even the sitting area off the library? Victor understood without question. He prepared a comfortable corner room with a daybed and simple furnishings. Kinley unpacked slowly, placing her few belongings in drawers. The quiet luxuries still felt foreign, like borrowing someone else's life. She enrolled at a local university in a social work program, starting with introductory courses. Classrooms filled with discussions about community support systems resonated deeply. She listened more than spoke. At first, absorbing perspectives on family dynamics and recovery. Victor never pushed. Evenings, they shared meals prepared by his longtime housekeeper. He talked about Frances when Kinley asked how she organized food drives as a teenager, how she believed small acts could rebuild trust after hardship. I should have seen the signs sooner, he admitted one night over tea. Trusting paperwork over people was my mistake. Kinley nodded, stirring her cup. We both trusted too easily. They decided to channel the recovered funds into something meaningful. David helped establish a modest foundation named after Victor Maddox. Its focus stayed narrow: emergency housing grants and mentoring for young adults displaced by natural disasters. The first awards went to Florida, families still rebuilding. Applications arrived steadily. Kinley reviewed them in the evenings, matching needs with available resources. Seeing direct impact gave her purpose. One afternoon, a plain envelope arrived via David's office. Inside was a handwritten letter from Hadley. I've had time to think about everything it read. I knew Mom favored me and never questioned it. The things I said to you, calling you lazy, making fun of your clothes, were cruel. I'm sorry. I wish I could take them back. Kinley read it twice in silence. The words carried regret, but memories of years spent on the sidelines surfaced too. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, neither replying nor discarding it. She made no effort to contact Diane or Hadley again. Visits, letters, updates. None came, none were sought. Diane served her sentence in a low-security facility, routine, strict and days-long. Former friends distanced themselves. Social circles closed ranks around reputation. Hadley adjusted to ordinary life, with the aunt, public high school, part-time job at a local cafe. The shift from privilege to normally proved jarring, but she adapted without public complaint. Kinley's days gained rhythm. Morning classes, afternoon volunteer shifts at a Manhattan crisis center, evenings, studying or reviewing foundation files. Victor joined board meetings when health allowed, offering quiet guidance. Trust grew gradually. She accepted the larger bedroom when ready. They took walks in the park, discussing books or current events. Victor shared more photos from old albums, Francis at graduation, holding newborn Kinley briefly before complications set in. Some nights doubts resurfaced. Kinley wondered if she could ever fully let go of the years, feeling invisible in her own home. Therapy sessions through university helped unpack the layers. "I'm learning boundaries aren't selfish," she told Victor after one appointment. "Cutting contact doesn't make me unforgiving. It makes me protective of what peace I've found." He listened without judgment. The foundation expanded slowly. A second round of grants supported tutoring programs for displaced teens. Kinley spoke at a small donor event, voice steady as she explained why stable housing mattered more than money alone. Standing on the penthouse balcony, one crisp evening, city lights sparkling below, Kinley reflected on the path. "Money can disappear," she said aloud to the night air. "Trust can be broken by the people meant to guard it. But what no one can take is the choice to keep going, to turn pain into something that helps others." She thought of families receiving aid because of the foundation, of students like her finding second chances. "Some wounds don't heal clean," she continued softly. "They leave scars, but scars remind us we survived. And surviving isn't the end. It's the beginning of deciding who we become next." Victor joined her at the railing, silent companion. Kinley leaned against it, breathing in the cool air. The trust fund had been restored through seizure and restitution, but its original purpose felt distant now. What mattered was the life built from remnants, the quiet mornings with real family. The work that gave meaning, the hard one, understanding that worth isn't measured by what others give or take. She turned inside, closing the glass door on the